Hey there, wizards. How's it going? Another episode of Illustrated Magic is on the air, the segment where I read Harry Potter, with brand new illustrations made exclusively for these episodes. In the last episode, I read Chapter 7.
If you haven't seen the previous episodes, just go to the playlist. Everything is there. Remember, you can support this segment through the QR code showing up here on the screen, or the link in the description.
And then you receive the illustrations that appear here in the episode digitally, so you can print and color them however you want. Remember that it's very important to identify yourself. Put your email there so I can send you the illustrations, okay? Otherwise, I can't send the illustration to you, all right? So, don't forget your email in the message field. Messages, information. Let's go to our reading. Chapter 8. The potions master there. Look where? There. Next to the tall boy with red hair and glasses. Did you see his face? Did you see the scar? The whispers followed Harry from the moment he left the dormitory. The next day, the kids lining up outside the classroom stood on tiptoe to get a peek.
Or they would walk back and forth in the corridors to see him twice.
Harry wished they wouldn't do that, because he was trying to concentrate on finding his way inside. There were 142 staircases in Hogwarts, wide and imposing, narrow and rickety, some that led to a different place.
On Fridays, others with a step in the middle that disappeared, and you had to remember to jump over it.
Besides that, there were doors that wouldn't open unless you said please or tickled them in the right spot, and doors that weren't really doors, but solid walls pretending to be doors.
It was also very hard to remember where things were, because everything seemed to change places all the time.
The people in the portraits would leave to visit each other, and Harry was sure the crests moved around. Man, Hogwarts is enchanting, isn't it? I think it's charming that the school is always moving, always alive, magical like that. I find it enchanting. The ghosts didn't help at all either. It was always a horrible shock when one of them suddenly passed through a door you were about to open.
Nearly Headless Nick was always happy to point Gryffindor students in the right direction.
But Peeves the Poltergeist meant 2 locked doors and a trick staircase if you ran into him when you were late for class. He dumped waste paper baskets on people's heads, pulled rugs out from under their feet, and hit them with bits of chalk.
Or he would sneak up behind them, invisible, grab them by the nose and squeal.
I grabbed him by the beak. Worse than the poltergeist, if that was even possible, was the caretaker Argus Filch. Harry and Ron managed to earn his ill will. On the very first morning, Filch found them trying to force their way through a door that, unfortunately, was the entrance to the forbidden corridor on the 3rd floor. He didn't want to believe they were lost, because he was sure they were trying to break in on purpose, and he threatened to lock them in the dungeons. They were saved by Professor Quirrell, who was passing by. Filch had a cat named Mrs. Norris, who purred like a cat, a skinny, dust-colored creature with bulging eyes like lamps, just like Filch's. Man, I remember when I read Harry Potter for the first time, and I had no idea how to read the name of that hellish cat. I kept saying Madame Norara, because, I had no idea what a cat was. Purr. I never had a cat, in my childhood. So, I remember I only found out what purring was when I was a bit older, Cats weren't animals I was interested in. I really liked dogs when I was a kid, so, I read Harry Potter for the first time when I was 8 years old. This Madame Nora here, for me, was really hard to read. After I grew up, when I understood that cats make that this is purring, right? I was like, I got it, Madame Nora, in that way. Then her name made sense to me. Anyway, let's get back. She patrolled the hallways alone. If anyone broke a rule in her presence, even put a toe out of line, she would run to get Filch, who would show up wheezing in 2 seconds. Filch knew the school's secret passages better than anyone, except maybe the Weasley twins, and could appear suddenly, like a ghost.
Man, another comment I need to make, sorry. I'm fascinated by secret passages. Fascinated. It's something I think is amazing. Amazing. Any movie, thing, cartoon that has like that fake wall where someone moves a torch and opens something, I love it.
A painting that hides a secret passage. I'm fascinated by that. The dream of my life is to be able to build my own house and have a secret passage in it. I think it's amazing, amazing. I had a friend whose bathroom, he had a bedroom and his bathroom was through it. Like, you would go through his wardrobe, like, it was a wardrobe door. It was a fake door. I thought it was amazing. I thought it was incredible, man. Seriously, incredible.
One day I'm going to have a secret passage in my house. Anyway, sorry.
The students hated her, and the greatest ambition of many was to give Madame Nora a good kick. Besides that, when someone managed to find their way to the classrooms, there were the classes themselves.
Magic was much more than waving a wand and saying a few funny words, as Harry soon discovered.
They had to study the night sky through the telescope every Wednesday at midnight and learn the names of the different stars and the movements of the planets. 3 times a week, they went to the greenhouses behind the castle to study herbology with a short, fat wizard named Professor Sprout. Notice the mistake here, with a short and fat wizard named Professor Sprout. In this first edition, Professor Sprout is identified as a male professor. This was corrected in later printings. Anyway, with whom they learned how to take care of all the strange plants and fungi and discovered what they were used for without favor. The most boring class was the history of magic, the only subject taught by a ghost. Look how interesting. Here too, in this first printing of Harry Potter in Brazil, the name is History of Magic Tricks, not History of Magic. It was also changed later. It was corrected. Professor Beans was really very old when he fell asleep in front of the fireplace in the staff room and got up the next morning to teach classes, leaving his body behind. Beans talked non-stop while they wrote down names and dates and ended up confusing Americo the Evil with Ulrich the Oddball. Sorry.
I think I'll comment on this chapter a lot since it has some really interesting things.
Professor Beans. First of all, Professor Beans. I really wish I had seen him in the movies. I think it's undeniable how much the movies make Hogwarts not seem like a real school.
Because, like, the classes are shown.
If you stop to think about it, they show basically 2 or 3 classes in the movies, and that's it. In each movie, it's just 2 or 3 classes. In the first movie, it shows them having class with Snape. Then it shows them not really having class with Quirrell, but a bit of Quirrell's class, but with other students. It shows the flying lesson, right? But then, it shows Professor Minerva's class in the first one. It shows Minerva's class, them arriving late in the first one. But still, these are very, very, very shallow things, not explored at all, which makes it seem like Hogwarts is actually just a summer camp, right? But in reality, Hogwarts is tough. It's a school with a student schedule, a pretty demanding curriculum. So, I'm really excited about the series because of that, because the series will show it. So there's a big vacation, a large amount. So it's a real school, the classes, how hard it was, how complex it was. Not just simply making it look like a summer camp, because honestly, the Hogwarts from the movies seems like one. And another thing I like here is that when they mention the names of characters from the chocolate frog cards, right? These 2 characters mentioned here, Emmerich the Evil and Ulrich the Oddball, they're from the chocolate frog cards. Back to the series. Vacation, all about the characters. He taught spells. He was a tiny wizard. There was a spell class in the first movie too. Professor Flitwick, who taught spells, was a tiny wizard who had to stand on a pile of books to see over the table. At the beginning of the first class, he took the role, and when he got to Harry's name, he let out an excited squeal and fell off the pile, disappearing from sight. Professor Minerva was different. Harry was right when he thought she wasn't a teacher any student would want to annoy.
Strict and intelligent, she gave them a lecture the moment they sat down for the first class.
Transfiguration is one of the most complex and dangerous types of magic you will learn at Hogwarts. Anyone who fools around in my class will leave and not come back. You've been warned. Then she turned the desk into a pig and back into a desk again. Everyone was very impressed and eager to start, but they soon realized they wouldn't be turning furniture into animals for quite some time.
After taking the complicated notes, they were given a matchstick and began trying to turn it into a needle.
At the end of class, only Hermione Granger produced any effect on the matchstick. Professor Minerva showed the class how the matchstick had turned all silver and pointy and gave the student a rare smile. I don't know if you've ever noticed this or never stopped to think about it, but it's always been something I've thought about.
Here, we see them trying to turn a matchstick into a needle.
The matchstick is a completely Muggle artifact. It's used to make fire, something that wizards don't. The matchstick, a matchstick, 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 matchstick. It's a matchstick, matchstick. A school has a matchstick. Okay, I know that here in the book it's to get familiar. Everyone knows what a matchstick is, but I don't know. It could be a twig on a needle. But not that it gets in the way. That's not it. It doesn't get in the way at all. But it's interesting, right? It's like how Ron got tape to fix his wand when it broke in the second year, right? Like, where did the tape at Hogwarts come from? You know? These are little details that, for me, weren't so well thought out in the story. Like, in the movies themselves, or I don't know, lights turned on with electricity like in Newt's house in Fantastic Beasts. There's a lamp turned on, you know? Man, he was a wizard, you know, so I don't know. There are things like that. In Harry Potter too. In the Harry Potter movies, there are also lamps like that. In the Malfoy house, there's a lamp with a light bulb like that. Man, it's weird, you know? Anyway, we're back. The subject everyone was really looking forward to was defense against the dark arts. But Quirrell's classes were a joke. His classroom smelled strongly of garlic, which everyone said was to ward off a vampire he had met in Romania and was afraid might come to attack him any day. His turban, he said, was a gift from an African prince as thanks for getting rid of a troublesome zombie. But the students weren't quite sure if they believed the story. First, because when Seamus Finnegan eagerly asked Quirrell to tell how he had dealt with the zombie, Quirrell turned red and started talking about the weather. Second, because they noticed there was a funny smell around the turban, and the Weasley twins insisted that it must be full of garlic too, so Quirrell was protected.
Anywhere here is also an interesting thing. They mention a zombie, but it's Saturday. It's pretty much one of the only times a zombie is mentioned here in the book.
Because what do we have that's closest to a zombie, in reality? In the Harry Potter universe, it's the Inferi, which are corpses reanimated by dark magic to serve as puppets for dark wizards. Anyway, so that's even mentioned in articles, and that they are. That many are. There are no zombies in the Harry Potter universe, precisely because zombies, they are not developed in the Harry Potter universe, because there already is something like that in Harry Potter. The Inferi, right? So it's funny to see. Interesting to see how zombies are mentioned here and then. Never again. They almost never show up, right? Harry felt relieved to find out that he wasn't too far behind the rest of the class.
Many students came from Muggle families and, like him, had no idea they were wizards and witches.
There was so much to learn that even people like Ron weren't that far ahead. Friday was an important day for Harry and Ron. They finally managed to find their way to the Great Hall and have breakfast without getting lost even once. "What do we have today?" asked Harry to Ron while putting sugar on his oatmeal. "Double potions with the Slytherin guys. Snape is the head of Slytherin. They say he always protects them. Let's see if that's true. I wish Minerva would protect us." Professor Minerva was the head of Gryffindor, but that didn't stop her from giving her students a mountain of homework. The day before. At that moment, the mail arrived. Harry was used to it by now.
But they were startled on the first morning when hundreds of owls suddenly flew into the main hall. During breakfast, they circled the tables until they spotted their owners and dropped letters and packages onto their laps.
Hedwig hadn't brought anything for Harry so far. Sometimes she would come in to nibble his ear and eat a bit of toast before going to sleep in the owlery with the other school owls. This morning, however, she fluttered between the jelly and the sugar bowl and dropped a note onto Harry's plate. He opened it immediately. "Dear Harry," said a very messy handwriting. "I know you have Friday afternoons free, so would you like to come have a cup of tea with me around 3 o'clock? I want to know how your first week went. Send us a reply." Through Hedwig, Hagrid, Harry borrowed Ron's quill and wrote, "Yes, I'd like to. See you later." On the back of the note, and sent Hedwig off again.
It was lucky that Harry had Hagrid's invitation.
Something to be happy about, because potions class had been the worst thing that had happened to him so far, at the start of the opening feast of the school year. Harry had the impression that Professor Snape didn't like him. By the end of the first potions class, he saw that he was right. It wasn't just that Snape didn't like Harry, he hated him. The potions classes were held in one of the dungeons. It was colder there than in the rest of the castle, and it would have given you chills even without the stuffed animals floating in glass jars on the walls around. Snape, like Flitwick, started the class by taking attendance, and like Flitwick, he paused at Harry's name. Yes, he said quietly. Harry Potter, our new celebrity. Draco Malfoy and his friends Crabbe and Goyle snickered, covering their mouths with their hands. Snape finished the roll call and stared at the class. His eyes were black, like Hagrid's, but they didn't have Hagrid's warmth. They were cold and empty, and reminded one of dark tunnels. You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making, he began. He spoke barely above a whisper, but they didn't miss a single word. Like Professor Minerva, Snape had the gift of keeping a class silent, effortlessly. Since we don't make foolish gestures here, many of you might think this isn't magic. No, I hope you truly understand the beauty of a cauldron simmering over a slow fire, with smoke shimmering. The delicate power of the liquid that flows through human veins and bewitches the mind, confuses the senses. I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, and even put a stopper in death, if you are not the bunch of dunderheads they usually have me teach.
More silence followed this little speech. Harry and Ron looked at each other with raised eyebrows.
Hermione Granger was sitting on the edge of her seat and looked desperate to start proving she wasn't a dunderhead. Potter, Snape said suddenly, what would I get if I added powdered asphodel root to an infusion of wormwood? Powdered root of what to an infusion of what? Harry looked at Ron, who seemed just as puzzled as he was. Hermione's hand shot up in the air. I don't know, sir, said Harry. Snape's mouth twisted into a sneer. Fame, it seems, isn't everything, and he ignored Hermione's hand. Let's try again, Potter.
If I asked you, where would you go to get it?
Bizarre, Hermione raised her hand as high as she could without getting up from her desk, but Harry had no idea what a Bezoar was. He tried not to look at Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle, who were shaking with laughter. I don't know, no sir. Thought you didn't need to open the books before coming, huh, Potter? Harry forced himself to keep looking straight into those cold eyes. He had flipped through the books at the Dursleys' house, but did Snape really expect him to remember everything he had seen? 1,000 magical herbs and fungi? Snape continued to ignore Hermione's trembling hand. What's the difference, Potter, between monkshood and wolfsbane? Upon hearing this, Hermione stood up, her hand stretched toward the dungeon ceiling. I don't know, said Harry quietly, but I think Hermione does. Why don't you ask her? Some boys laughed. Harry's eyes met those above and he winked. Snape, however, didn't like it. Sit down, he said sharply to Hermione. For your information, Potter, Wormwood, and Asphodel make a sleeping potion so strong it's known as the Draught of Living Death. The Bezoar is a stone taken from the stomach of a goat, and it can save you from most poisons. As for the two aconites, they are plants of the same botanical genus. So, why aren't you copying what I'm saying? There was a sudden noise of people grabbing quills and parchment, and above that noise, Snape's voice. And I'll take 1 point from Gryffindor for your impertinence. Potter, you know? What's cool about this part is that there's this whole secret message behind Snape's words, which is really cool. I don't know if you've seen this secret, which is actually official, about the Victorian language of flowers and all that. But also, Snape says something here that Harry later uses in the 6th year to save Ron, and he reads this in the Half-Blood Prince's book. So, Snape is giving this information twice, right? First, he says it in class, and then Harry sees it in his book, without knowing it was Snape's, and saves Ron's life. things didn't get better for the Gryffindor students.
In the continuation of the potions class, Snape paired them up and told them to mix a simple potion to cure boils.
He walked imposingly, with his long black cloak, watching them weigh dried nettles and crush snake fangs. He criticized almost everyone except Draco, whom he seemed to like, and had just told everyone to look at the perfect way Draco had cooked the slugs. When a loud hiss and clouds of acrid green smoke filled the dungeon, Neville had managed to melt Seamus's cauldron, turning it into a twisted bubble.
And their potion was leaking across the stone floor, burning holes in the boys' shoes. In seconds, the whole class was standing on their stools.
Meanwhile, Neville, who had been drenched in potion when the cauldron melted, had his arms and legs covered in red boils that made him moan in pain.
"You foolish boy," snapped Snape, cleaning up the spilled potion with a wave of his wand. "I suppose you added the porcupine quills already." "Before taking the cauldron off the fire," Neville whimpered as the boils started popping up on his nose. "Take him to the hospital wing," Snape ordered Seamus. Then he turned angrily to Harry and Ron, who were working next to Neville. "You, Potter, why didn't you tell him not to add the quills? Did you think you'd look better if he messed up? That's another point you've lost for Gryffindor." The injustice was so great that Harry opened his mouth to argue, but Ron kicked him from behind the cauldron. "Don't push it," he whispered. "I've heard that Snape can be really hard to deal with, man. You see how unfair Snape is, right? He's really unfair. And people complain about it, about Dumbledore's points. Dumbledore just makes up for it. He only does justice with the points he gives to Gryffindor, because Snape is really unfair, man." When they climbed the stairs to leave the dungeon, an hour later, thoughts were racing through Harry's mind, and he felt down, losing steam. 2 points for Gryffindor in the first week. Why did Snape hate him? "So much excitement," said Ron. "Snape is always taking points from Fred and George. Can I go with you to Rubius's house?" At 5-3, they left the castle and crossed the grounds. Hagrid lived in a wooden hut on the edge of the Forbidden Forest. A crossbow and a pair of boots were at the door of the house. When Harry knocked on the door, they heard frantic running and fierce barking. Then, Hagrid's voice saying, "Back, Fang, back!" Hagrid's bearded face appeared in the crack as the door opened. "Wait there! Back, Fang!" He let them in, struggling to hold firmly onto the collar of a huge boarhound. There was only one room in the house, with hams and pheasants hanging from the ceiling. A copper kettle was boiling on the stove, and in one corner there was a massive bed covered with a patchwork quilt. "Make yourselves at home," said Hagrid, releasing the boarhound, which immediately jumped on Ron and started licking his ears. Like Hagrid, it seemed obvious that Fang wasn't as fierce as expected. "Oh, this is Ron," said Harry to Hagrid, who had gone out, pouring boiling water into a large teapot and arranging biscuits on a plate. "Another Weasley, huh?" exclaimed Hagrid, noticing Ron's freckles. "I've spent half my life chasing your brothers out of the forest." The biscuits nearly broke their teeth, but Harry and Ron pretended to like them and told Hagrid about their first classes. Fang rested his head on Harry's lap and covered his robes with drool. Harry and Ron were pleased to hear Hagrid call Filch an old git. As for that cat, Madame Norris, sometimes I feel like introducing Fang to her. You know, every time I go to the school, she follows me everywhere. I can't get rid of that cat. It's Filch who tells her to do that. Harry told Hagrid about Snape's class. Hagrid, like Ron, told Harry not to worry, that Snape didn't really like any student, but he seemed like he really hated me. Nonsense! Why would he hate you? But Harry couldn't help but think that Hagrid avoided looking at him when he said that. "How's your brother, Charlie?" Hagrid asked Ron. "I liked him a lot. He was really good with animals." Harry wondered if Hagrid had changed the subject on purpose. While Ron told everything about Charlie's work with dragons, Harry listened.
A piece of paper that was on the table, under the tea cozy.
It was a news clipping from the Daily Prophet. The Gringotts case. Investigations continue into the break-in at Gringotts, which occurred on July 31st and is believed to have been the work of dark wizards, unknown ones. The goblins of Gringotts insisted today that nothing was stolen. The vault that was broken into had actually been emptied earlier that day. But we're not going to say what was inside so that no one gets involved if they have any sense, said a spokesperson. This afternoon, Harry remembered that Ron had told him on the train that someone had tried to rob Gringotts, but he hadn't mentioned the date. Rubius, exclaimed Harry, that Gringotts break-in happened on my birthday. It might have been happening while we were there. There was no doubt about it. This time, Rubius definitely avoided looking at Harry. He muttered something and offered him another biscuit. Harry reread the news.
Actually, it was emptied earlier that day. Rubeus had emptied Vault 713.
If you could even call it emptied, someone taking that lumpy little package was probably what the thieves were after. When Harry and Ron returned to the castle for dinner, their pockets were heavy with the cookies they had been too polite to refuse. Harry thought that none of the classes they had attended so far had given him as much to think about as tea with Hagrid. Hagrid! Had Hagrid picked up the package right on time? Where was the package now? Did he know something about Snape that he didn't want to tell Harry?
And so, we finished Chapter 8. Chapter 8, Potions Master. I love this chapter. I really like it.
Because the mystery starts to build there. It starts to take shape. It's cool that we can see the clues there. Man, does Hagrid know something about Snape? Why did he dodge the question, right? It plants a little seed of curiosity in us. I really like that. And the next chapter, Chapter 9, is Midnight Duel, which is a chapter I love. That's when Harry falls into Draco's trap, right?
And here we're practically reaching almost the middle of the book, right? Almost halfway. Actually, we've already passed the halfway point a little, since there are 17 chapters, right?
But that's it, my wizards. I hope you enjoyed reading this chapter. If you liked it, don't forget to share this episode. Your like and your comment are very important here. And of course, if you want to contribute to the productions here at Magia Illustrata, just help through the QR code.
This is where I send the illustrations to you by email, okay? Don't forget the email. Don't forget, the contribution is voluntary. You can give as much as you want and receive these really cool illustrations, made with a lot of care here for Magia Illustrata. If everything goes well, I won't promise, but if everything goes well, every Saturday this month, now in March, we'll have an episode of Magia Illustrata, and we'll keep it that way until we finish. If everything goes well, it's not just up to me, it depends on Eric too, because it's an edition that takes a little more time, so he has the regular videos to edit here for the channel, right? The regular videos, so maybe he won't be able to edit all the episodes, but let's see. I'll keep recording here, sending them to him, so we can stay ahead on this, alright? See you next episode of The Leaky Cauldron. Mischief managed. Bye.